Ladies and gentlemen, today I want to share with you one of the most transformative ideas I've ever come across, an idea that has the power to change your thinking, your emotions, and your entire life. The title of my talk is Questions Are the Answer. It might sound simple, even strange at first, but once you understand the power of questions, you'll realize they are one of the most important tools we have for shaping our destiny. The questions we ask ourselves on a daily basis may seem like harmless thoughts, but in truth they hold immense power. Questions are not just linguistic tools, they are mental instruments that guide our awareness, shape our focus, and ultimately determine our life experience. The phrase, questions shape focus and focus shapes reality, encapsulates the profound truth that our inner dialogue, driven by the questions we ask, has the power to sculpt our perception of the world and the results we produce in life. Every time we ask a question, we command our mind to concentrate on a particular aspect of our experience, and what we focus on becomes our reality, regardless of the actual circumstances. Imagine the mind as a camera lens. Whatever the lens focuses on becomes the center of the picture, while everything else fades into the background or disappears entirely. Questions are the mechanism that shifts and sharpens that lens. When you ask a question, your brain begins to scan for answers, like a search engine combing through an infinite database. If you ask empowering questions, your brain highlights empowering thoughts, emotions, and options. If you ask limiting or negative questions, your focus narrows to problems, fears, and worst-case scenarios. For instance, asking, "Why am I such a failure?" directs your mind to find examples of times you fell short, reinforcing a negative self-image. On the other hand, asking, "What did I learn from this experience?" shifts your focus to growth and progress, turning even setbacks into sources of strength. This process happens whether we are conscious of it or not. Most people go through life unaware that the quality of their questions is directing their emotional states, guiding their decisions, and defining their identities. The truth is, our minds are always active, asking and answering questions all day long. The challenge is that many of these questions are habitual and automatic, formed long ago based on childhood experiences, past conditioning, or social influences. Because they operate beneath our awareness, these habitual questions shape our focus without us even realizing it. That's why some people consistently feel anxious, doubtful, or powerless, because the questions they regularly ask, like, "What if I mess this up?" or "Why doesn't anyone appreciate me?" lead their focus toward fear and inadequacy. To change your life, you must first become aware of the questions you habitually ask yourself. Once you identify them, you can begin to shift them consciously. The difference between a life filled with stress and a life filled with joy can often come down to the difference between asking, "What's wrong with my life?" versus "What's right in my life right now?" One question focuses your attention on problems, the other on gratitude. And whichever you choose will determine the emotional state you live in over time. This emotional state influences the way you behave, the decisions you make, and the way you perceive opportunities and obstacles. It's important to understand that our brains are hardwired to answer whatever question we give them, whether or not it's a good question. The mind doesn't stop to evaluate whether a question is helpful, it simply responds. So if you feed it low-quality questions, you get low-quality answers and consequently a low-quality life. But if you train yourself to ask high-quality questions, questions that are solution-oriented, empowering, and expansive, you unlock creativity, resilience, and possibility. For example, instead of asking, "Why can't I do this?" ask, "What resources can I tap into to make this happen?" One question closes the door, the other opens it. Moreover, questions don't just influence our internal world, they affect our external reality too. When you consistently ask questions that guide your focus toward growth and solutions, you start noticing more opportunities around you. You become more resourceful. Your communication improves, your relationships deepen, your goals become clearer. You move from being reactive to proactive. This shift in focus changes how you show up in the world, and the world responds in kind. People are drawn to those who are curious, positive, and focused on solutions rather than problems. Opportunities tend to find those who are mentally prepared to see and act on them. Consider the stories of successful individuals, innovators, or leaders across all walks of life. Their journeys are marked not just by talent or luck, but by the questions they chose to ask during moments of uncertainty. When others ask, "Is this even possible?" they ask, "How can this be done?" When others ask, "Why me?" they ask, "What is this teaching me?" These individuals shape their focus through empowering questions, and that focus shaped a reality full of progress, creativity, and breakthrough. In contrast, many people never move forward because they allow fear-based questions to dominate their thinking, which narrows their focus to only what could go wrong. The beautiful part of this truth is that it's entirely in our hands. We don't have to wait for external circumstances to change to begin shaping a new reality. We can begin by changing our focus, and we change our focus by changing our questions. It's as simple as pausing and asking yourself, what am I focusing on right now? Is it helping me or holding me back? Then follow up with a better question like, what could I focus on that would make me feel strong and resourceful right now? One of the most powerful daily practices is to create a routine of asking empowering questions first thing in the morning. Questions like, what am I excited about today? Who do I love and who loves me? Or what am I grateful for? Set your mind in a positive direction. They train your brain to look for beauty, opportunity, and purpose. This daily mental conditioning slowly rewires your internal dialogue and transforms your experience of life. In essence, your questions create a filter through which you interpret everything around you. Change the filter and you change the picture. Whether your focus is on gratitude or lack, on hope or fear, on failure or feedback, that's what becomes real for you. That's what you experience, and eventually, that's what you create in the world. So the next time you find yourself stuck, overwhelmed, or uncertain, remember this: questions are the answer. You don't need to have it all figured out. You just need to ask a better question. With consistent practice, you can train your mind to focus in a way that empowers you, uplifts you, and drives you forward. And when your focus changes, your reality follows. Every single day, we are bombarded with a flood of thoughts, emotions, and experiences. In this constant stream, it is the questions we ask ourselves that serve as the steering wheel of our minds. Whether we realize it or not, questions are the silent architects of our focus, and what we focus on expands to become our reality. The statement, questions shape focus and focus shapes reality, captures an often overlooked truth about how we create our inner and outer worlds, what we dwell on, what we choose to give our attention to, and what we ask ourselves on a regular basis becomes the lens through which we view everything else. This lens is created by our questions, and once it is in place, it determines not only what we notice, but also what we miss. Our brains are hardwired to answer questions. When a question is asked, the mind immediately begins searching for an answer, whether the question is constructive or destructive. The problem is, most people are unaware of the questions they are asking themselves. These questions often run on autopilot, deeply embedded in our subconscious, shaped by past experiences, childhood conditioning, and the beliefs we hold about ourselves and the world. They can be as subtle as, why can't I ever succeed? Or what if something goes wrong? Though they might seem harmless, such questions guide our focus toward fear, failure, and inadequacy. And what we focus on consistently, we begin to believe. We find evidence to support it, and over time, it becomes our lived reality. On the flip side, empowering questions redirect our focus toward growth, possibility, and solutions. Questions like, what can I learn from this? Or what's great about this moment? Or how can I turn this around? Lead the brain to seek out empowering answers. Instead of shutting us down, they open us up. They help us take responsibility, think creatively, and recognize our potential. They give us access to resourcefulness, resilience, and clarity. In this way, questions do not simply influence what we think about, they shape the entire quality of our internal experience. The impact of focus is profound. When we focus on problems, we feel overwhelmed. When we focus on opportunities, we feel hopeful. When we focus on gratitude, we feel joy. In every moment, our emotional state is shaped by what we choose to focus on. And that choice is initiated by the questions we ask ourselves. A person who wakes up asking, what can go wrong today, will experience a very different day than someone who wakes up asking, what can I be excited about today? Even if they face the same events, their inner experience and their actions will be worlds apart. This principle extends into how we interpret events in our lives. The same situation can be seen as a tragedy or a lesson depending on the questions we ask. A job loss, for instance, can lead to despair if we ask, why does this always happen to me? But it can lead to empowerment if we ask, what does this make possible? Or how can I grow from this? The situation hasn't changed, but our perception of it has. And since our perception defines our reality, changing the question changes everything. In the world of personal development, high performers, leaders, and change makers have long understood the value of asking better questions. They don't waste time on questions that reinforce limitation. Instead, they ask questions that open the door to innovation and excellence. Questions like, what's the best possible outcome? Or what would I do if I weren't afraid? Or how can I serve at the highest level? These questions not only shift focus, they drive action, they stimulate better decisions, clearer goals, and stronger commitment. This is how focus, when directed by empowering questions, begins to shape reality on a practical level. Moreover, questions influence the way we see ourselves. Identity is largely constructed through internal dialogue, and that dialogue is driven by questions. Someone who constantly asks, what's wrong with me, eventually begins to believe that they are broken. But someone who asks, how can I become the best version of myself, builds an identity around growth and potential. Our self-image, our confidence, and even our habits are shaped by the questions we repeat most often. This idea is not just psychological, it has physiological effects as well. When we ask fearful questions, our bodies respond with stress hormones. When we ask hopeful or curious questions, our bodies respond with openness and vitality. The minds and body connection is deeply influenced by focus and therefore by the questions that drive that focus. Health, performance, relationships, and fulfillment are all tied to the quality of our inner questions. In practice, becoming more intentional with questions begins with awareness. Start by noticing the questions you ask throughout the day. Are they focused on limitations or possibilities, on blame or responsibility, on fear or action? Once you become aware, you gain the power to choose better questions. And once you choose better questions, your focus begins to shift. With time, this shift becomes a habit, and the habit becomes a way of life. An excellent way to harness this principle is by developing a daily habit of asking empowering questions in the morning. Questions like, what am I grateful for today? What is one thing I can do today to make progress? And how can I contribute to others today? Set the tone for the entire day. They create a filter of meaning, purpose, and joy that influences everything that follows. Instead of drifting through life at the mercy of unconscious thoughts, you begin to steer your mind and shape your experience deliberately. Ultimately, reality is not just what happens to us, it's how we interpret what happens. It's the meaning we assign to events. And that meaning is formed through the lens of our focus. If we ask better questions, we get better focus, and if we get better focus, we create a better, more empowering, and more fulfilling reality. So the next time you find yourself feeling stuck, overwhelmed, or uncertain, pause and ask, what am I focusing on right now? And is this focus serving me or holding me back? Then ask a better question, one that lifts you, one that guides you, one that opens you to new insight and action. In doing so, you'll begin to see how questions truly are the invisible hand shaping the direction and quality of your life, and you'll reclaim the power to shape your reality from the inside out. Questions are the silent navigators of our lives. They often arise in the background of our thoughts, subtly directing our attention, influencing our emotions, and determining the paths we take. Whether spoken aloud or whispered in the mind, questions are the triggers that ignite our decision-making processes and fuel the actions we take. The title, Questions Drive Decisions and Actions, highlights a profound truth that many overlook. Before every choice we make, before every step we take, there is a question that precedes it. This internal inquiry might be conscious or unconscious, empowering or disempowering, but is always present. Every decision starts with a question. Sometimes it's simple, like, what should I eat for lunch? Or, should I go out or stay in? Other times it's more profound. Am I in the right career? Is this relationship fulfilling me? Or, what is my purpose? These questions don't just prompt answers. They guide our decision-making by focusing our attention on specific elements of our situation. For instance, when you ask, what's the most efficient way to get this done, your brain filters out unnecessary distractions and zooms in on practical solutions. If instead you ask, why is this so hard for me? Your mind will search for reasons to validate that belief, which might lead to hesitation, frustration, or even giving up. The type of question we ask sets the direction for our decisions. Decisions, in turn, are the forks in the road of life. They determine the direction we head in, toward growth or comfort, fear or courage, expansion or contraction. If our decisions are based on low-quality or disempowering questions, we are more likely to remain stuck in patterns of indecision, self-doubt, and stagnation. On the other hand, high-quality questions generate clarity, courage, and momentum. Asking, what can I do right now to improve this situation, propels you toward action and responsibility. It puts you in a state of agency where you become the driver of change rather than a passive observer. These questions don't only determine what we do, they influence how we feel when we do it. The emotional state from which a decision is made often dictates its outcome. If we're asking ourselves fear-based questions like, what if I fail? Our decisions are likely to be cautious or avoidant, even when the situation calls for boldness. But if we ask, what if I succeed? Or what would I do if I were confident? We shift into a state of possibility and strength. From there, the decisions we make are more aligned with our goals and values. Emotions are not random. They are guided by the focus of our thoughts, and our focus is often determined by the questions we ask. Furthermore, actions are the tangible results of our internal world. A person who repeatedly asks, how can I make a difference today, is likely to engage in behaviors that reflect contribution, kindness, and productivity. In contrast, someone who constantly wonders, why does nothing ever work out for me, may fall into patterns of procrastination, resentment, or withdrawal. The action or inaction that results is a mirror of the questions driving it. When we're intentional about our questions, we begin to see a transformation, not just in our thoughts, but in the behaviors that shape our lives. In many cases, people struggle, not because they lack talent or opportunity, but because they are stuck asking the wrong questions. A person might have all the resources and skills necessary to move forward, but if they are focused on what could go wrong, they are likely to stay frozen. Conversely, even those with fewer external advantages can make remarkable progress when driven by empowering questions like, how can I turn this around? Or what's one small step I can take today? These types of questions encourage initiative, creativity, and perseverance. Great leaders, innovators, and change makers understand the power of questions. They ask themselves and their teams questions that challenge the status quo and stimulate fresh thinking. Steve Jobs was known for asking, what's the next great thing? Elon Musk often frames challenges by asking, how can we do this better, faster, and cheaper? These questions spark bold decisions and revolutionary action. On a smaller scale, individuals who transform their lives from overcoming adversity to achieving long-held dreams often start by asking new questions that disrupt old patterns of thought. What do I truly want? Or what's stopping me from living my best life? These questions become the turning points that redirect the course of their decisions and ultimately their destiny. Another critical aspect of how questions drive action lies in accountability. When you ask yourself, what can I do to improve this? Instead of blaming others or circumstance, you bring the responsibility back to yourself. This shift in mindset leads to constructive decisions and proactive behavior. You move from being a victim of circumstance to being a creator of outcomes. That transformation begins with a single question that empowers rather than disempowers. Questions also serve as anchors during times of uncertainty. Life is unpredictable and challenges are inevitable. When things go wrong, many people spiral into doubt and despair. But those who have trained themselves to ask constructive questions can remain grounded and resilient. Instead of asking, why is this happening to me? They ask, what can I learn from this? Or, how can this make me stronger? These questions open the door to growth and transformation, even in the midst of adversity. The act of asking the right question sets a new trajectory in motion. Over time, the questions we ask ourselves repeatedly become part of our belief system. They shape our identity and our worldview. Someone who constantly asks, how can I make today meaningful, starts to see themselves as someone who lives with purpose. Someone who asks, what's wrong with me, begins to believe they are flawed or inadequate. These repeated questions turn into stories, and those stories dictate the choices we make, the risks we take, and the relationships we build. They become the framework within which we operate. To transform your decisions and actions, start by upgrading your questions. Begin each day by asking a few intentional questions. What am I grateful for? What is one thing I can do today to move closer to my goal? Who can I help today? These questions set your mind on a path of clarity, purpose, and contribution. Throughout the day, when faced with decisions, pause and ask, what's the best choice for my growth? Or which action aligns with my values? The more consistently you do this, the more your decisions and actions begin to reflect your highest intentions. In essence, the questions we ask form the invisible threads that connect thought to behavior, intention to outcome, and vision to reality. They are the ignition switch for the decisions we make and the actions we take. By mastering the art of asking powerful, constructive questions, we gain the ability to direct our focus, shift our emotional state, and create meaningful results. Questions are not just tools, they are catalysts. They are the starting point of every transformation. So if you want to change your life, begin by changing your questions, and the decisions and actions that follow will shape a reality that aligns with your deepest purpose. Every great advancement, every breakthrough, every transformation in human history began with a question. Questions are the seeds of progress. They challenge the status quo, open the mind to new perspectives, and invite the imagination to explore uncharted territory. The title, Questions Unlock Possibility and Innovation, captures this timeless truth. At the heart of every innovation, whether it's a technological leap, a personal achievement, or a societal shift, lies a question that dared to challenge what was known and accepted. It is through questioning that possibilities are uncovered and new paths are forged. When we ask questions, we engage the brain's natural problem-solving mechanisms. The mind is wired to search for answers. And once a question is posed, it triggers an internal exploration. This is not just a passive process. It's an active invitation to discovery. Questions compel us to look beyond the surface, to seek meaning, to understand the why behind the what, and to challenge the how of the now. A powerful question can dismantle mental barriers and open doors we didn't even realize existed. It transforms limitations into opportunities and confusion into clarity. Consider how children learn about the world. They are endlessly curious, asking why about everything. This curiosity is not a sign of ignorance, it's a signal of growth, exploration, and imagination. As adults, many lose this instinct, trading curiosity for certainty. But it is in embracing the unknown through questions that we rediscover our ability to innovate. Curiosity-driven questions are the foundation of creativity. They force us to think differently, to consider alternative approaches, and to imagine better outcomes. Questions like what if, why not, or how can this be improved are not just linguistic phrases, they are tools of transformation. Innovation rarely comes from knowing all the answers. It comes from asking the right questions. The world's greatest inventors, artists, scientists, and entrepreneurs weren't always the ones with the most resources or knowledge. They were the ones who asked the boldest questions. Einstein famously said, "The important thing is not to stop questioning." He didn't come up with a theory of relativity by accepting the world as it was. He questioned the nature of time, space, and reality itself. This same spirit can be applied at any level of life, from launching a startup to transforming personal habits. In business, questions are the cornerstone of progress. Companies that innovate successfully don't just react to market trends. They anticipate them by asking questions their competitors aren't. What do our customers really need that they aren't telling us? How can we deliver more value in a simpler way? What would happen if we completely reimagine our process? These types of questions push teams to think beyond incremental improvement and toward breakthrough ideas. Organizations that foster a culture of inquiry tend to outlast those that only focus on efficiency and tradition. The willingness to question assumptions leads to the kind of innovation that shapes industries. On a personal level, asking empowering questions can unlock inner potential. Instead of staying stuck in fear or doubt, a person can ask, what strengths do I already have that can help me through this? Or what new possibilities are available to me if I let go of this belief? These questions shift attention from limitations to possibilities. They redirect mental energy away from self-defeat and towards self-empowerment. A single shift in questioning can change a person's mindset from helpless to hopeful, from reactive to proactive. The questions we ask ourselves daily determine whether we live in a world of limitation or a world of opportunity. When faced with challenges, most people ask disempowering questions without realizing it. They wonder, why me, or what if I fail? These questions only reinforce fear and paralysis. But imagine replacing them with, what can I learn from this? Or what's one thing I can do differently right now? These are questions of possibility. They don't deny the difficulty of the moment, but they invite growth and forward movement. The direction of our lives is largely shaped by the direction of our questions. If we want a different outcome, we need to start by asking different questions. Creativity, too, is born from questioning. Artists ask, what message do I want to express? Writers ask, what story hasn't been told? Designers ask, how can this be more beautiful, functional, or meaningful? Innovation is not just a technical endeavor. It is a creative one, and creativity thrives in an environment where questions are encouraged. The more we question, the more we expand the boundaries of what's possible. In fact, the very act of questioning trains the brain to be more open, flexible, and adaptive. These are the mental states required for innovation to thrive. One of the most powerful aspects of questions is that they promote collaboration. When we ask others for their perspectives, we create dialogue. When leaders ask their teams, what ideas do you have, or how can we solve this together, they foster a sense of ownership and creativity among others. The best ideas often come not from one brilliant mind, but from a collective inquiry where everyone is encouraged to contribute their unique view. This approach to innovation not only yields better results, it strengthens relationships and builds cultures of trust and engagement. In education, asking questions is just as critical as answering them. Students who are taught to question deeply become critical thinkers. They don't just memorize facts, they seek to understand context, purpose, and meaning. Teachers who encourage inquiry over compliance empower their students to become lifelong learners. And in an age where information is abundant, but wisdom is rare, the ability to ask good questions is more valuable than ever. Asking questions also has the power to break through emotional and psychological barriers. For those who feel stuck, trapped by fear or self-doubt, the right question can act as a key that unlocks a new way of seeing the world. Questions like, what would I do if I knew I couldn't fail? Or what would my life look like if I truly believed in myself? Create a vision of possibility that wasn't accessible before. And once that vision becomes visible, action follows. Ultimately, the questions we ask determine the future we create. They shape our thoughts, influence our choices, and fuel our actions. When we ask questions rooted in curiosity, hope, and courage, we unlock new levels of creativity, resilience, and purpose. We move from a passive existence to an active, empowered life. In a world that is constantly changing, the ability to ask meaningful, thoughtful, and bold questions is not just a skill, it is a superpower. So if we want to unlock more possibility and fuel more innovation in our work, in our relationships, and in ourselves, we must learn to become better questioners. We must challenge our assumptions, explore the unknown, and dare to wonder what could be instead of settling for what is. Because every new solution, every bold vision, every step forward starts with a single, powerful question. Never underestimate the power of a question. It's not just what you ask others, it's what you ask yourself every day that shapes your beliefs, emotions, decisions, and destiny. Questions are not just a way to seek answers, they are the answer. So if you want to change your life, change your questions. Thank you.